clicked on this video, you're probably interested in learning Korean. You might already be on an intermediate level or just starting out. Anyhow, you decided to take your learning journey to the next step by watching this video. So no matter where you're at in your learning journey, I'm going to share some things that have helped me personally to become fluent. If you're new to my channel, my name is Joy and I've been learning Korean for 6 years now. I recently took the topik and achieved level 6, so I would consider myself quite fluent, and I also often have native Koreans say to me that I sound just like a Korean when speaking. I also have a video where I talk about how I learned Korean in Korean, so you can check that out after this one to see that I actually do speak Korean, but I just decided to make this video in English to cater more to people who are not fluent in Korean yet. Also, this obviously applies to any other language you might be learning, but I'm just talking about Korean in particular because I feel like that's what most people that watch my videos are interested in. So without further ado, I will let you in on how I became fluent in Korean. So for those who haven't watched my other video yet, I will give you a quick summary of my journey with studying Korean. So first I started studying on my own with a bunch of different books for about half a year. And then I did this in-person language course, which was a beginner's course. I think I did that for about 1 to 2 years, and after that I started taking private online lessons, to the point where my teacher literally said to me that he doesn't know what to teach me anymore because I'm basically fluent. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm not actively studying, but I'm relatively confident that I won't lose my Korean in the near future because I'm also going to Korea very soon. I originally planned on introducing you to some of the materials and books I used when I started out learning Korean, and also the materials we used in class, but I honestly think that's not really the important part. And I'm gonna go into more detail on this, but basically, my opinion is that if you're just starting out and you're a beginner and you don't have the basic knowledge, it doesn't really matter what kind of resources you use. As long as you're learning a sufficient amount of vocabulary and grammar, that's where you have to start. So the rest of the tips I'm going to be sharing in this video are more for people who are already intermediate and have a basic knowledge of vocabulary and grammar to understand a bit of the language, but who want to be able to talk more fluently and sound like a native. But if you're just starting out with learning the language, I also have some things I want to say to you. I feel like there's this myth or stigma around having to study like so many hours every day in order to become fluent fast. And while that may be helpful over a short period of time, I don't think it's sustainable, especially if you see studying as a chore and if you don't find it enjoyable. If it's stressful to you, that's not going to be sustainable over a long period of time. So I would even say, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but in my opinion, you don't have to study every day, and you definitely don't have to study for hours at a time. Like in my case, I think I started out like that because at first I was like very motivated and excited by learning. So I sat down every day and I had fun doing it, but after I started taking classes, I only had like the class once a week and maybe did like a bit of studying in between classes. Maybe if I had done it with more discipline, I might have become fluent faster, but I would have just worn myself out. So I would say, and although this might be a wild claim, traditional studying is overrated, and you should find a method of surrounding yourself with the language that is fun to you. So my approach when it comes to learning another language is definitely fun over discipline. So now I'm gonna get into my tips on becoming more fluent and speaking more like a native if you are already on an intermediate level. The number one thing, talk, talk, and talk. Obviously, it's better if you have someone who is native in Korean or whatever language you're learning that you can talk to and get real-time feedback from. I was lucky enough to have a native Korean as my teacher who I could talk to for 90 minutes every week, and that gave me a lot of practice. But even if you don't have anyone to talk to, or maybe you can't afford classes, I highly suggest talking to yourself. For me, this is easy because I always talk to myself, but I know that some people find it weird, which I cannot understand. Like, this is kind of off topic, but if you're living alone, I have heard some people say that they go like days without talking. So like they're basically silent for days, but I could never do that. Whenever I'm alone, I talk to myself constantly. So this is easy for me, but even if you don't talk to yourself on a regular basis, I would still suggest trying out talking to yourself in the language that you're learning just to practice speaking. Because studying on paper, writing texts, doing exercises, the stuff that you do in school that might make you fluent on paper, but you're not going to be able to hold a conversation, which in my opinion is so much more important and valuable. So yeah, my first tip is practice talking as much as you can. Even if your vocabulary is still lacking and you have to start out with basic short sentences, start from there. And this ties into my next point, which is don't be afraid of making mistakes, sounding stupid, or even failure. It is only natural that you're going to make mistakes, but that's how you grow. By making mistakes, you can learn, and if you don't try, you can't succeed. So put yourself out there. Another thing I personally did was there's this app called Hello Talk where you can chat with natives from the language you're learning. And it's kind of like a language exchange. So if there's someone who wants to learn your native language and you want to learn their native language, then you can each text the other person in the language that you're learning and give each other feedback, correct your grammar and stuff like that. And I feel like that's a great way to also improve your language skills in a more natural way. Or for example, and this goes back to the first tip, if you have a Korean restaurant near where you live and there's Korean people working there, you can try ordering your food in Korean or making a reservation over the phone if you're not ready to talk to someone in real life. Just try to get as much practice and experience in talking as you can without being afraid to not be perfect, because you won't be perfect at first. I wasn't either, but I still tried, and that's how I improved. The next tip is something I already mentioned in my first video I did about Korean. There I said that watching dramas and movies in that language can help you get a better feeling for how the language is spoken. But someone actually commented on that video something I hadn't thought of, but now that I think about it, I really agree with it. It's that if you watch movies or dramas, they're obviously scripted, and most of the time, the conversations that are had there are not quite realistic. So if you're trying to become more fluent in daily life conversations, what I would recommend over movies or dramas is things like variety shows, or the thing that helped me the most is if you're into K-pop, just watching live streams of your favorite idols or watching YouTube videos in Korean. The important thing here is, even if it might be hard at first, do not watch it with subtitles in your native language, because you will only read the subtitles and not even listen to what they're actually saying. So either you just turn off the subtitles completely and try to understand as much as you can, or you can put Korean subtitles and read along with what they're saying. And even though at first you might only understand a few words or sentences, it's going to become better with time. It's the same as a baby first learning to speak. They have to constantly listen to the people around them, and imitate what they're saying. And that's how they learn to speak. And it's the same with any new language you're learning. So the next tip is to never translate. Now, what do I mean by this? First of all, please do not use Google Translate or any other translator like that. There are better and worse ones, but what I'm saying is, if you're trying to talk in another language, don't translate the sentences in your head. For example, if your native language is English and you're trying to speak in Korean, don't form the English sentence in your head and then translate it into Korean, but try to already think in Korean. And this might be hard at first, but because the grammar is so different between the two languages, firstly, it's going to take you a lot more time to actually get the sentence out. And secondly, it's so important to get a feeling for the language. So if you do have a sufficient vocabulary already, I highly suggest you try to think in that other language. Another thing, if you want to talk more like a native, it's really important to get an intuitive feeling for the flow of the language, the grammar and intonation, especially if your native language is vastly different to the language you're learning. And the best way of doing this is by just hearing other native speakers talk. And this goes back to what I said before, listening to natural, real-life conversations that people are having, for example, TV shows, not dramas, but like variety or reality shows. And the last thing is, surround yourself with the language as much as you possibly can, even if you don't understand much at first. And this also ties back to what I said about watching things without subtitles in your native language. If I'm going to use a metaphor, dive headfirst into the sea that is Korean. Oh my god, what the fuck? You'll learn as you go. So some practical things I'm gonna recommend to you is only watching things with Korean subtitles or without subtitles at all. Putting your phone in Korean so that you just see it all the time. So those are all of my tips on how to become more fluent in Korean or any other language, how to speak more like a native speaker. I hope this helped you in any way. And if you feel overwhelmed, you don't have to do all of this at once. Just start with one thing, try out maybe one of the things I recommended and see if that works for you. This is just what helped me personally. Everybody learns in a different way, so this might not even be applicable to you, but just give it a try. I'm just sharing my personal journey and what helped me. If you have any questions or feedback, you can leave that in the comments and let me know if there's anything else you want me to talk about. If you enjoyed, please make sure to like and subscribe. Get ready for more content from Korea, about Korea and learning Korean. So join me to discover more of the joy of life in the life of joy.